Good morning, everybody. It's very good to be here with you. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Okay, very good. All right, well, very important topic, which I'm very excited to present to you on. We're going to save your children from digital destruction with 4 practical steps that you can take starting today, in fact. You're here if you're a parent because you want to give your child everything, lifelong friendship with them, the gift of passing on the faith. If you're a leader in the Archdiocese, you want to do so for many children and many families. Sometimes parents feel like missionaries dropped into enemy territory behind enemy lines without any backup. You see a culture of death around you. Young people glued to their phones, walking around like zombies, looking down. There's this kind of lifeless, vapid expression, passive attitude. And you can wonder, is this just me? Am I the crazy one? Or has something gone terribly, terribly wrong? It would be helpful to be able to know the research rather than just relying on personal anecdote. But there is actually quite a lot of research out there. And it's hard to make sense of it all. It's hard to even take the time to look into it. But I did, because it's my job. And this is what I found. So since 2010, if you look at the dotted line there, that's 2010. Anxiety among girls has doubled, and depression among girls has doubled, and depression among boys has tripled. But maybe this has affected older people as well. This graph is 12 to 17-year-olds. How have older people fared? Well, it turns out that if we look at across the age groups, the youngest group is affected the most. In fact, the oldest age group studied here, 50 plus, hasn't changed at all in terms of anxiety prevalence. The younger you are, the more anxious you are, and the more anxious you have gotten since 2010. I've just shown you 2 statistics, depression and anxiety, in other versions of this talk. I've also shown suicidality, emergency visits for self-harm, hospitalization for suicide attempt, and the list goes on and on. But not everything increased. Time spent with friends has decreased significantly since 2010. And now young people are spending less time with their friends than middle-aged people did just a few years ago. Other things have decreased too. Outdoor play has decreased. And this all begs the question, what started in 2010? Some things didn't change. Radio access didn't change. TV access didn't change since 2010. Computer access didn't change since 2010. Internet access changed a little bit. It increased by 19%. Social media access increased by 65%. And smartphone access increased by 131% since 2010. Internet, social media, smartphones. That has what's changed. And where we are now is a much different place. Now 95% of teens have a smartphone, and average entertainment screen time is 8 hours and 39 minutes a day. That is average entertainment screen time, not including the 3+ hours that most young people are on screens for school purposes. And so if you add that up, a teen in the US is on their screen for 75% of their waking lives. And keep in mind, this is just the average, which means about half of people are actually using more than that. In fact, teens self-report that 46% of them are online almost constantly. So this isn't about just a little extra screen time. This is about a culture of death, raising your children. And the truth is, they were made for more than this. God had a different plan for us. Let's take a look at the amazing plan that God has for us in terms of our own brain development. What this illustration shows is the connections between neurons, so the interconnections in the brain. From birth to 3 years, this is a critical period. There's an explosion of connections. The highest point is from 8 months to 24 months, in which there are 40,000 connections a second being created in that child's brain. This is a critical period for every life skill, including language and others. They call it a critical period because if these skills are not developed during this time, then it's extremely hard, if not practically impossible, to develop that skill. Think of learning a new language like Chinese now, which would be very difficult, whereas for a baby, it would be as easy as learning English or any other language. Now, this explosion of brain connections doesn't last forever. From 3 years onward, the process shifts to neuronal pruning, which means the connections reduce. Especially until 15 years, there's a vast reduction in the connections. The purpose of this is efficiency, that the brain gets more efficient, better at doing what it has learned, what it has practiced up to that point. And what it hasn't practiced up to that point, it gets much more difficult to do. So, in other words, we become what we do. If we are engaged in positive activities, learning an instrument, learning languages, unsupervised free play, exploring nature, spending time with people, arts and crafts, developing social skills, that's what the child gets really good at doing and can continue to do for the rest of their life. On the other hand, they can get really good at playing video games and taking selfies. We become what we do. The last thing to develop in the brain, the front of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, takes 25 to 32 years to develop. That part of the brain is responsible for judgment, impulse control, forward planning, getting in touch with your highest ideals and morality. Because it takes at least 25 years, up to 32 years to develop, it's just unfair to expect a young person to have the same level of judgment and maturity and responsibility as a fully developed adult. In fact, the teenage brain, not only is the judgment center not developed, but also it has more dopamine receptors, which means it is more wired to seek pleasure, to seek novelty, to have an increased sense of risk-taking, to seek stimuli, pleasure. So the teenage brain is highly intelligent, the judgment center is not developed, it is more sensitive to pleasurable rewards, which makes it the perfect victim for the three traps. I'm going to talk now about toxic screen use. Not all screen use is toxic. Some screen use is good. We're using a screen right now, 2 screens in fact, multiple screens if you include those ones out there. Some screen use is neutral. So it could be used for good, it could be used for bad. And some screen use is toxic. What makes toxic screen use toxic is it's designed to be addictive, so it's almost impossible or maybe even impossible to use it well. Toxic screen use includes video games, social media, and pornography. And all of these are primarily accessed on the smartphone. Let's start with video games. There was a worldwide study of 600,000 participants, a dozen countries around the world of adolescents. They found that of all adolescents around the world, 9% have a diagnosable video game addiction disorder. And they defined adolescence as being between the age of 9 and 21. So I've never thought of a 21-year-old as being an adolescent, but that's part of the perpetual adolescence that we live in these days due to the digital destruction that young people are experiencing. So 9% of the world's population of 9 to 21-year-olds have a diagnosable video game addiction disorder, which is a very high standard of addiction, by the way, if you look at the criteria. There are many more people who have significantly problematic levels of video game consumption that do not qualify as an addictive disorder. The second best-selling video game franchise in history, it's called Grand Theft Auto. 70% of US teens have played it at some point. The game teaches you how to be an underworld drug lord. It includes killing cops, rapes, prostitution, of course, drug trafficking, torture, and so on. Video games like this and others, they provide an adrenaline rush, constant stimulation, a sense of progress, which is much easier than real-world progress where things take much longer, instant rewards. What ends up happening is boys see the purpose of life as maximizing mindless entertainment and minimizing work and effort. And they see work and effort as a means to the end of mindless entertainment. This is why they're dropping out of school. This is why they're not embarking on a career path. This is why they're continuing to live with their parents in their 20s, 30s. And I've met parents of these children, and I've met these children themselves who are now adults. They're not even children. Well, they're adults legally. And they see their day-to-day life as I'm earning money working at a restaurant so that I can pay for in-game purchases in video games. That's the first trap. The second trap, the one that girls are more likely to fall into, but of course also boys, is social media. Average girl in the US has a full-time job on social media, curating her own profile and viewing other people's profiles. That's 37 hours a week. That's social media alone, not including other screen time. Social media is designed to be addictive, in part through slot machine technology. In the behavioral literature, this is called variable reward ratio. It's known to be the most addictive way of rewarding someone. You reward them at a random interval. That's how slot machines work. You don't know when you're going to get the reward. That's what keeps people hooked. It might be the next pull. It might be the next post. Now, in social media, the reward is the positive social feedback, likes, comments, shares, etc. The way the social media controls that is they randomly control how many people see your posts, which controls how much positive feedback you get. So for example, with TikTok, the way the algorithm works is when you first set up your account, it shows your videos to a lot of people. You get a lot of positive feedback. You think, oh, maybe I'm onto something here. Maybe I'm giving the world something it needs. So stay a little longer. Then it gives less positive feedback. Then you feel the need to, I just got to stick with it more, and I can feel that same experience again. Young people feel the social pressure, fear of missing out. They want to maintain their streak, their daily streak of using the social media. And the content isn't neutral. So one study of 9 to 12-year-old boys found that 33% of them had received nude photos. The FBI estimates that there are 500,000 online predators active each day, and half of victims are between the ages of 12 and 15. In September 2013, this girl, Rebecca Sedgwick, was bullied by two of her peers, 12-year-old and 14-year-old, online through social media. They said things like, "You're ugly, why are you still alive, and go kill yourself." So she went to the top of a cement factory and jumped off and killed herself. And afterwards, one of the girls posted, "Yes, I know I bullied Rebecca, and she killed herself, but I don't give an F." This is what I mean by toxic screen use. If that's not toxic, I don't know what is. And it's in large part due to the anonymity that screens allow. Be very surprised if the same person would be willing to say that face to face. In fact, they probably wouldn't even be able to look her in the eyes face to face, because if you've ever met a teen that has a smartphone, you'll find it very difficult to make eye contact with them. Adolescence is the worst age for social media. This is when teens are forming their identity. It's when they're most sensitive to peer pressure, to influence from their peers rather than trusted adults. They're basing their own image on what other people say and think about them. They're hypersensitive to peer rejection. They're prone to risk-taking without evaluating the dangers. But by far, the biggest risk is pornography. So I've been mentoring boys for 15 years, since I was a junior in college, sophomore in college. And this is by far the biggest challenge that young people face. You can ask any priest about this, anyone that works with young people. It's a little bit hidden. You can meet someone who they pray, they go to mass every day, they're smiling, they're friendly, and they've been addicted to pornography for years, and they don't know what to do about it. I interviewed Jason Everett, who's the biggest chastity speaker in this country, and he agreed that this is the biggest problem facing young people. Just to give you the sense of the scope here, so the largest pornography company is owned by a Canadian private equity firm called Ethical Capital Partners, and they've had 42 billion visitors a year. That was in 2019, so it's gotten worse than that. There was a huge spike after COVID. In 2019, it was 42 billion visitors a year, which is six visits for every person on the planet Earth, and that's just one website. They reported that 91% of their traffic comes from smartphones. So smartphones are the primary way that anyone, including young people, access pornography. I even talked with one young man who said that the purpose of a smartphone is to view pornography. The statistics on age of first exposure are mixed. There's a statistic from, I think it's Common Sense Media, a few years ago. It's the most recent reputable one I could find, although I think it is a little bit outdated. So they estimate that the average age of first viewing pornography is 12 years old. Now, more recent than that, I interviewed a gentleman who spoke with the Diocese of Arlington in Texas. They conducted their own private research and found that in their diocese, the average age of exposure was 6 years old. In either case, it's very young. Usually it happens accidentally. But once you see that first image, it's very hard for a young mind to let go of that. And the curiosity begins. They go to it more and more. Pretty soon, they're addicted. I see them 10, 15 years later in my office, and it's very, very difficult to break someone out of that addiction. Why is pornography so addictive? I mean, of course, it's the deepest physiological drive that we have. And today, people can access more nudity than someone 100 years ago could in their entire lifetime. Now, another aspect to this is a concept called the supernormal stimulus, which is a Nobel Prize winning discovery. The idea is very simple. The idea is basically that if you identify what is attractive about a particular thing and just maximize that specific aspect, you'll make it that much more attractive in a way that they're not going to be able to resist, or is very difficult to resist. This was studied in butterflies, in which the researchers identified what was attractive about female butterflies was the size and brightness of the wings. So they created plastic models with larger wings and brighter wings. And the male butterflies preferred to mate with the plastic models rather than the real life butterflies. Does that sound familiar? Young people today prefer to mate with a digital representation in their imagination than talk to a real life human being and develop a real relationship. The content in pornography is not realistic, it's super normal, it's highlighting the things that are attractive. And it leads to a need for greater and greater novelty and perversion over time, because as with any exposure, we get used to things over time. So as the years go on, the person gets into darker and darker content. In summary, why these types of screen use are toxic. One, they rob us of joy in normal human experiences. Nothing can compete with it. Real world friendships, prayer, relationship with God, being outside in nature, taking joy in hard work, intellectual development. It can't compete with this. What happens with addiction is the body's dopamine receptors. These are the receptors that receive the dopamine molecule that allows us to experience physiological pleasure. These dopamine receptors actually shut down when we've been exposed to a flood of dopamine. So when we experience an unnatural level of pleasure for a prolonged period of time, the body's pleasure receptors shut down. That has two consequences. One, we feel the need to have an increased exposure to the source of that pleasure, so more video games, more social media, more pornography. The other thing that happens is normal day-to-day things now feel much less pleasurable because we have less pleasure receptors. So it's like the volume has been turned down on real life. And that's exactly what you see with young people. That our Lord came to bring us life and bring it in abundance. With addiction, the real life is just sapped of its vitality. It's like living in black and white. It's like the sound has been turned down. It's no longer as attractive. Of course, toxic screen use also alters how people view women. It poisons romantic relationships, leads to objectification of women, even one's own family members, sister, mother. Speaking of pornography specifically, it leads to increase in sex trafficking, sexual abuse, including of minors, greater forms of sexual perversity. The people in these videos are not happy. We've seen testimonies of people who have quit their careers. They're very depressed, they're suicidal, some of them have killed themselves. And they say, the only way that I could continue that lifestyle was by taking cocaine before each video because I was so depressed. So this isn't just about bad technology, this is a war on the souls of your children. "2010 is the year everything changed." It's also the year I started mentoring boys. It's the year that this picture was taken. Over the next 15 years, I thought I was just teaching character development, life skills, but I learned much more. I saw everything. I've met Catholic moms who come up to me after the talks and say, "We raised our child well. She went to an expensive private school. She went to mass every week. One day she got onto a social media site, and then shortly after that, she was convinced that she was lesbian. She became suicidal, and she's been hospitalized 3 times for suicide attempt." I've met with daily mass goers who've been addicted to pornography for years and are despairing and depressed, don't know where to turn. They've tried everything, and they can't stop. But I've also seen incredible turnarounds. Amazing, amazing experiences that I never would have guessed would be possible if I hadn't seen them myself. People who have gone from being addicted to being free. So there's hope, and I've had the privilege of witnessing that. And that's what I want to share with you today, is the steps that you can change. Because I've dedicated my life to this, but you don't need a PhD to solve this problem. The solution is much simpler than it seems. Let's lay out a 4-step plan here. You can start taking action on these steps today. You can even complete most of these steps within 24 hours. The first step is to be the parent starting today. So if you're a parent, you can apply this yourself. If you're a leader, educator, you can convey this message to parents you work with. This might be the single most important message they need to hear because no one else is telling them this. The idea here, very simple, is that God put you in charge of raising your children. If you are the parent, you are the one that has received the authority from God to raise your children, to draw them to the good. That authority does not come from civil law, does not come from the government. It does not come from Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk or OpenAI. It doesn't come from their friends. It doesn't even come from the church or your school. The authority to raise your children comes directly from God. Many papal documents have confirmed that. So you are their parent. Be their parent. You can be their friend, but that doesn't mean being their buddy. Being true friends with someone means doing what is good for them, even when they don't like it. And especially at this age, they're not going to like doing everything you ask them to do because they do not have good habits. They do not have virtue. They're not completely developed. Your job is to help them to do what is right, not what is easy. And that is true freedom. That's what they will thank you for when they are adults. That's what no one else will do for them or can do for them. That's what they will look back on and say, my parents were so good. I was at a wedding a few weeks ago. I actually taught this young man when he was in 8th grade. Now he's getting married. Now he's married. The bride stood up, took the microphone, and said, I want to thank my parents. They were so strict when we were growing up. They didn't let us have technology, and I hated it. And now, when my husband and I have kids, we're going to raise our children the exact same way. So thank you, Dad. That was a very beautiful moment, and that's what you can hear as well. The message here is going to look a little different from mom and dad. What I've seen is that mom typically is more sensitive to anxiety, fear, worry. She's worried about physical safety. She's worried about what her friend group, peers will say about her decisions. She's worried about what her child will think about her. She's worried about whether her child will be socially accepted. So these worries are oftentimes, it's typically mom, could be dad too, but typically mom. They're holding back parents from doing what's best for their child. So the problem is actually not ignorance of the harms of technology. The problem is that sensitivity to anxiety, that worry. We can address, I mentioned 4 different sources of that worry or fear. We can address each of those in the Q&A if you're interested. But the main point here is you can be anxious and you can do the right thing. Being anxious is not a problem. I specialize in helping people with anxiety. I love helping anxious moms. They can turn around very quickly. Some people need professional help. Most people don't. You can do the right thing even when it's difficult, especially when you find your husband supporting you. So the message to dads is be a strong support for your family. Be a strong support for your wife. Be a strong support for your kid, for your child. Be the protector. Be the person who's willing to do the right thing even when it's difficult. Because if you don't, what happens is the power hierarchy in the family becomes completely inverted. What I've seen happen in my clinical practice is the child desperately wants toxic screen use because that's what the child's emotions are guiding the child towards. The child is not guided by reason, the child is guided by emotions. The child's strong emotions lead the mom to feel bad for the child. And when the mom feels bad for the child, she kind of puts subtle pressure on the dad. And the dad has heard in our culture that being a good man means being a nice guy and basically just being a pushover and doing what other people tell you to do. They've been stripped of their role in society and their role in their family. And so the dad just goes along with it because he doesn't want to be mean. He doesn't want to be the bad guy. In other words, the family is being run by the emotions of a teenage girl. That's what I've seen. So, first step, be the parent starting today. You can do it. The second step, very simple solution here. So parents often think that this is a complicated topic. They think that they have to be experts in technology, that they have to figure out every new device that comes out, every new social media, all the lingo. that young people are using. How am I supposed to figure all that out? I mean, young people have literally a full-time job on the internet, if not more. I don't have time to research all these things. And the good news is you don't. You don't actually have to be an expert in technology because the solution is very, very simple. Never give your child a smartphone. That's it. It's really that simple. Parents make it difficult by overcomplicating it. They make it difficult by opening themselves up for negotiation, by not putting a clear line, by not letting your yes be yes and your no be no. By saying, maybe when you're in 8th grade, wait till late. Maybe when you're 14, maybe when you're 16, maybe when you're 18, maybe when you go to college. Or, yeah, you can have this app, but you're not ready for this other app yet. And it just opens up this ongoing, interminable negotiation and battle as long as they're under your roof and maybe even longer. And you may think that once you give in, the battle is over. But once you give in, the battle has just begun. Because once they have access to that addictive habit, they're not going to want to stop there. People say, I give my children an hour of video games on the weekend. That's better than most. But they're not going to want to stop at an hour. These things are designed to be addictive. You give them that hour, and they're going to ask for 2, they're going to ask for 3. It's just going to keep going. And I'm not saying that smartphones aren't helpful, aren't useful, aren't convenient. I use a smartphone. I find it extremely helpful. I'm running my own business. If a child is running his own business, maybe he could benefit from having a smartphone. So my message is not that no one should ever have a smartphone, although probably most people should not. My message is that a child is not ready for a smartphone. If the brain takes 25 years to develop or 32 years to develop, how can an 18-year-old, even a 20-year-old, even a 25-year-old, frankly, which is the age I was when I got a smartphone, how can they be ready for it? They're not. Unless you're a 1 in a million person, which some people are, you're not going to be ready for it. So stay strong and don't give your child a smartphone. It's important to emphasize the positive. This talk isn't just negative. It's not just about what not to do. I'm a big fan of emphasizing the positive, drown evil in an abundance of good. So start building real life. That includes unsupervised free play. I understand boys very well, and they need unsupervised free play. I interviewed the headmaster of the best boys' school in Houston, Western Academy, and he told me parents should not know where their children are. I do not want to know where my child is. After school, drop your bag off, get a snack, go outside, and I don't want to know where you are until dinner. That's how it used to be. That's how boys became men. That's how young people developed self-confidence and self-esteem and fortitude. That's how they were willing to die for their values. Now boys are just raised to be like women. That's how schools treat them, even Catholic schools. Unsupervised free play is very important, not just for boys, but for girls as well. That's how they learn social skills. If a child is constantly helicoptering them, which is what happens when most children play, it's usually under adult supervision because it's in extracurriculars, it's in organized sports, or just in the neighborhood. I have a neighbor who, the only time I see their kids outside are when the adults are 3 feet away from them, watching them and telling them what to do. That's not how a child develops social skills. Giving them responsibility. So these include things like, every child should wake himself up on time, make his own bed, prepare his own bag, prepare his own things for school, do his homework without being asked, maybe pack his lunch. I know an Italian family that makes these, the mom makes these custom meals. Okay, that's good, I respect that. Italy has a much higher level of food than America does. I wish I had that growing up. But most families, it's just kind of like sandwich and chips and go. A child should be able to do that, right? They shouldn't be dependent on a parent when they're in high school to do all things, doing their own laundry, doing their own chores. But when it comes to responsibility, the bar isn't taking care of oneself. That is the minimum. The minimum a child should do is take care of himself or herself. Really, the bar is taking care of others, and that's how it's always been. If you read Little House of the Prairie, she's a mom when she's 12 years old, basically. She's taking care of her 2 younger sisters. In fact, she does become a mom when she's 19. She gets married when she's 18 and becomes a mom when she's 19. She's running a whole household by herself on the open prairie with no support. These were pious women. These were strong women. The women of 150 years ago were stronger than the men are today. That comes from having responsibilities. Genuine leisure. I was going to say this is my favorite, but really I was going to say that for each one of them, so I love all of these. But genuine leisure, what I mean by that is wholesome ways of spending free time, ways of enjoying oneself, of resting, that develop yourself, that enrich you, that allow you to grow, that make you a better person, that make you better able to love and serve others, that give glory to God. How much do we think of leisure, of rest, as an opportunity to give glory to God? When a child is playing a video game, is he giving glory to God? Is he enriching himself? Is he making himself a better person? Is he making himself a better father? Wholesome leisure includes things like developing the intellectual life through reading. It's not like you have to read Aquinas, which I enjoy reading, and I know high schoolers who do enjoy reading. But read a good adventure book. Read Little House on the Prairie or Little Britches. Have a house full of books. Wholesome leisure, reading, developing the intellectual life, appreciating arts and crafts, going out in nature, having a pet, taking care of a pet, learning about trees and birds. And at least in Houston, it's spring now. There's so many different types of birds. Kids love learning these things. Social relationships, in-person interactions, that's wholesome leisure. Thinking of little hobbies, woodworking, sewing, knitting. I'm a big fan of bringing back the finishing school for girls. Life skills that allow you to serve others better. So they're fun, but also they allow you to serve others. So let's start building real life today. Step 4, befriend one family. I have recognized over time that the isolation that good people experience is a major, major obstacle. It's a major challenge. People feel like they're on an island, right? Wherever you are, you're by yourself. You feel like you're the only one. You feel like even if you don't give your child a smartphone, which maybe some of you here are in that category, well, your child is the only one who doesn't have a smartphone in their class, in their grade, maybe even in their school. I've worked with parents who, a school of 1,600 boys, their child and their child's best friend and one other random guy are the only ones in the school who don't have a smartphone. And I applaud that. I respect that. But it is helpful if you have support. So befriend a family, find a like-minded family. They're going to be here in this room, or you can get in touch with them. And if you're a leader here, I think one of the best things that you can do is, 1, give the power back to the parents. You are in control. You are the authority. Do what you know is good. And then 2, connect them with other like-minded parents. Because if you're a leader, you know more people. It's not only for the parents' own personal support. It's helpful to have someone to complain to and commiserate with and to just go to for guidance and support and encouragement. But it's also for the friend group for your child. Because so much of this is based on peer pressure. The children only want it because everyone else has it. If they were in a different friend group, they would stop asking for it. I talked to a parent who moved schools for their daughter. The daughter stopped asking for the smartphone and stopped asking for the expensive purse because the previous school was very materialistic. Everyone had a smartphone. So reach out to one family starting today, find that support. You can begin implementing these today. The first one is an interior decision that can happen right now even. The other ones you can implement within 24 hours. Parents can go to Half Price Books and buy 50 books for $10. You can brainstorm with your spouse, one family to reach out to, and you can reach out to them today. You can send them a text. So that's a healthy use of screen use. Waiting is not neutral. The longer that you wait, the more the traps tighten. The stakes are not just the happiness of your child, the stakes are the eternal well-being of your child's soul. You know, unfortunately, I think we really underestimate this point. If you read the story of the missionaries, the martyrs, St. Isaac Jogues evangelizing in this continent, why would you travel across the world to face torture and death to people who don't understand you if you thought that they could go to heaven just by being nice and by relying on the mercy of God? Why would you go back home having had your thumb bitten off and then choose to go back to this continent to die? You would only do that if you thought that that person's eternal soul was at stake. I think we've kind of missed this message now in our present climate. Do we believe that souls are at stake here? That the eternal well-being of a child is at stake? I want heaven to be full. I want to be there with all of you and with all the children that you take care of. And that's going to be a lot of fun. And I think it's going to be an adventure getting there. But today is the beginning of that adventure, as long as we don't delay and act. I recently spoke with a dad who followed this strategy. He didn't give his child a smartphone. His children were very argumentative. They debate a lot. They question authority a lot, just like him. And when the oldest one got to college, he called his dad and said, "Dad, now I understand why you didn't give me a smartphone. I've seen what it's done to my peers, and I thank you for it." You can hear that message as a parent. You can hear that thank you. They will thank you for it. They will respect you for it. They will love you for it. And the best compliment that you can get on that wedding day, when they're saying, "I'm going to raise my kids the same way that you raised me."